Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Wisdom of the Native Americans. Compiled and edited by Kent Nerburn. Narrated by Kaipo Schwab. Let us put our minds together and see what kind of life we can make for our children. Sitting Bull. Introduction. In 1492, Columbus and his crew, lost, battered and stricken with dysentery, were helped ashore by a people he described as neither black nor white, fairly tall, good-looking, and well-proportioned. Believing he had landed in the East Indies, he called these people Indians. In fact, they were part of a great population that had made its home on this continent for centuries. The inhabitants of this land were not one people. Their customs differed. Their languages differed. Some tilled the earth, others hunted and picked the abundance of the land around them. They lived in introduction different kinds of housing and governed themselves according to differing rules. But they shared in common a belief that the earth is a spiritual presence that must be honored, not mastered. Unfortunately, Western Europeans who came to these shores had a contrary belief. To them, the entire American continent was a beautiful but savage land that it was not only their right, but their duty to tame and use as they saw fit. As we enter the 21st century, Western civilization is confronting the inevitable results of this European-American philosophy of dominance. We have gotten out of balance with our Earth, and the very future of our planet depends on our capacity to restore the balance. We are crying out for help, for a grounding in the truth of nature, for words of wisdom. That wisdom is here, contained in the words of the native peoples of the Americas. But these people speak quietly. Their words are simple, and their voices soft. We have not heard them because we have not taken the time to listen. Perhaps now the time is right for us to open our ears and hearts to the words they have to say. Unlike many traditions, the spiritual wisdom of the Native Americans is not found in a set of scriptural materials. It is, and always has been, a part of the fabric of daily life and experience. One of the most poignant reflections of the spiritual message is found in their tradition of oratory. Traditionally, Indians did not carry on dialogues when discussing important matters. Rather, each person listened attentively until his or her turn came to speak, and then he or she rose and spoke, without interruption, about the heart of the matter under consideration. This tradition produced a measured eloquence of speech and thought that is almost unmatched for its clarity and simplicity. Indian reasoning about governmental and social affairs was also carried on with the same uncompromising purity of insight and expression. It is from these orations, recorded observations of life and social affairs, and other first-person testimonies that the materials for this book have been drawn. The wisdom has been available for some time, but much of it has been recorded only in imposing governmental documents and arcane academic treatises. The Wisdom of the Native Americans gathers 3 of New World Library's volumes of Indian oration into one collection. In addition to the short, distilled passages of Native American wisdom, a smaller volume I compiled with Louise Mengelkoch, this book includes the thoughts of one of the most fascinating and overlooked individuals in American history, Ohiyesa, also known by the anglicized name of Charles Alexander Eastman. Ohiyesa was, at heart, a poet of the spirit and the bearer of spiritual wisdom. To the extent that he dared, and with increasing fervor as he aged, he was a preacher for the native vision of life. It is my considered belief it is his spiritual vision, above all else, that we of our generation need to hear. We hunger for the words and insights of the Native American, and no man spoke with more clarity than Ohiyesa. Ohiyesa was born in southern Minnesota in the area now called Redwood Falls in the winter of 1858. He was a member of the Dakota, or Sioux Nation. When he was 4, his people rose up in desperation against the U.S. government, which was systematically starving them by withholding provisions and payment they were owed from the sale of their land. When their uprising was crushed, more than 1,000 men, women and children were captured and taken away. On the day after Christmas in 1862, 38 of the men were hanged at Mankato, Minnesota, in the greatest mass execution ever performed by the U.S. government. Those who were not killed were taken to stockades and holding camps, where they faced starvation and death during the icy days of the northern winter. Ohiesa's father, Many Lightnings, was among those captured. Ohiyesa, who was among those left behind, was handed over to his uncle to be raised in the traditional Sioux manner. He was taught the ways of the forest and lessons of his people. He strove to become a hunter and a warrior. Then one day while he was hunting, he saw an Indian walking toward him in white man's clothes. It was his father, who had survived the internment camps and had returned to claim his son. During his incarceration, Many Lightnings had seen the power of the European culture and had become convinced that the Indian way of life could not survive within it. He despised what he called reservation Indians, who gave up their independence and tradition in order to accept a handout from the European conquerors. He took Ohiyesa to a small plot of farming land in eastern South Dakota and began teaching him to be a new type of warrior. He sent him off to white schools with the admonition that it is the same as if I sent you on your first warpath. I shall expect you to conquer. Thus was born Charles Alexander Eastman, the Santee Sioux child of the woodlands and prairies, who would go on to become the advisor to presidents and an honored member of New England society. Ohiyesa, or Eastman, went to Beloit College, where he learned English and immersed himself in the culture and ways of the white world. Upon graduation, he went east. He attended Dartmouth College, then was accepted into medical school at Boston University, which he completed in 1890. He returned to his native Midwest to work among his own people as a physician on the Pine Ridge Reservation, but became disenchanted with the corruption of the U.S. government and its Indian agents. After a short-lived effort to establish a private medical practice in St. Paul, Minnesota, he turned his focus back to the issue of Indian-white relations. For the next 25 years, he was involved in various efforts to build bridges of understanding between the Indians and non-Indian people of America. He worked first for the YMCA, then served as an attorney for his people in Washington, then returned to South Dakota to spend 3 years as physician for the Sioux at Crow Creek. In 1903, he went back to Massachusetts and devoted himself to bringing the voice of the Indian into the American intellectual arena. He became deeply involved in the Boy Scout program, believing it was the best way to give non-Indian American youth a sense of the wonder and values that he had learned growing up in the wild. Eventually, with the help of his wife, he established a camp of his own in New Hampshire, in which he tried to recreate the experience of Sioux education and values for non-Indian children. But financial troubles and the fundamentally irreconcilable differences between Indian culture and white civilization ultimately took their toll. In 1918, he and his white wife separated, and in 1921 he left New England for good. He continued to believe that the way of civilization was the way of the future, but he had lost much of his faith in its capacity to speak to the higher moral and spiritual vision of humanity. He returned again to his native forests of the Midwest, devoting more time to his traditional ways, often going into the woods alone for months at a time. But he never ceased believing that the two cultures that had clashed so tragically on the soil of the American continent somehow had to become one if there ever was to be a true America with an honest and indigenous soul. Even though he had come to believe that white civilization was, at heart, a system of life based on trade, he still felt that it was the task of the best people, both Indian and non-Indian, to help America find a shared vision. As he said at the end of his autobiography, "From Deep Woods to Civilization," "I am an Indian, and while I have learned much from civilization, for which I am grateful, I have never lost my Indian sense of right and justice. I am for development and progress along social and spiritual lines, rather than those of commerce, nationalism, or efficiency. Nevertheless, so long as I live, I am an American." As an observer of Indian life, Ohiyesa was unlike any other. He was at once completely secure in his Indian identity, yet gave himself over completely to the search for meaning within the context of a European America. He tried with his whole heart and spirit to believe in the wisdom of each of the ways he had learned. If there was struggle, it was because the two ways coexisted so uneasily within one person. Though he lamented the passing of the Indian ways, he accepted it as the workings of the great mystery, and set himself to the dual task of bringing the ways of the whites to the Indians and the ways of the Indians to the whites. He never lost his grounding in his traditional ways, even while exploring the intricacies of the Christ ideal and dining with presidents. He was ever the observer, journeying ever deeper into the ways of white culture, trying, as his grandmother had always instructed him, to follow a new trail to the point of knowing. The writings he has left are the documents of that journey, crafted by a man with a warrior's heart, an orator's tongue, and human spirit of such dignity that it transcends boundaries of race and belief. Like much of the material here, the third part of this volume, the great speeches of Chiefs Red Jacket, Joseph, and Seattle, is best approached with an understanding of the Indian oral tradition these speeches represent. Most of us are trained to read with our minds. We pass over words, compressing them into ideas, and we use these ideas as the measure of our understanding. But there is another way to read, where the words themselves take on a life of their own, and the rhythms and cadences open a floodgate of images and sympathies until we feel the heartbeat of their author and sense the lifeblood of experience that they contain. It is a way of reading that is more akin to listening to music, where the sheer power of the sound can move the hearer to tears. This is the way we should read these great speeches. Like the insistent beat of ceremonial drums, their words weave a hypnotic spell, and the passion of their vision enters into the hearts as well as the minds of their listeners. These speeches are the songs of the spirit of great men who spoke for a great people. In their words, between their words, beneath and above their words, is the love, the faith, the anger, and the pathos of a people who believed in the ways of their ancestors and could not make these ways understood to the European settlers who were so intent upon changing them. Today, the battle is over. This continent is, at least on the surface, a distant mirror of the European continent, controlled in its shape and direction by the descendants of the Europeans who were once raw immigrants on its shores. But the spirit of the native people, the first people, has never died. It lives in the rocks and the forests, the rivers and the mountains. It murmurs in the brooks and whispers in the trees. The hearts of these people were formed of the earth that we now walk, and their voice can never be silenced. The three speeches gathered here give us a chance to hear that voice again. The selection of these particular speeches was made with care and love. I could have chosen more. I could have chosen otherwise. But these three, each imbued with its own individual genius, work together in a way that is almost transcendent in its poignancy and beauty. Red Jacket's speech shows us the strength and faith of the traditional way and stands like an oak against the coming storms of the European. Chief Joseph's speech takes us along on the journey of a people from free, loving, and hopeful children of the land to a fugitive remnant pursued through forests and mountains into a tragic submission on the windswept foothills of the Rockies. Chief Seattle's speech begins as an eloquent eulogy to the Indian people, but soon rises to become an admonition to us all and a bonding together of the Indian and non-Indian into a common fate. In the course of the three, we are carried along from the sunrise hopes of the native peoples as they offered the hand of friendship to a new and foreign visitor, to the sunset of their dreams as this visitor grew in number and in strength and betrayed the friendship with which he had been met, to the dawning of a new era in which we all must learn the lessons of the native people if we are to live honorably upon this land we all now share. These are wise men. They have much to teach. If we listen carefully, with good heart, they may teach us. I hope so, for we, as a nation, still have much to learn. Kent Nerburn, Bemidji, Minnesota. There is a dignity about the social intercourse of old Indians which reminds me of a stroll through a winter forest. Frederick Remington. Part 1. The Ways of the Native Americans. 1. The Ways of the Land. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth, befalls the children of the earth. Chief Seattle, Suquamish and Duwamish. I was born in nature's wide domain. The trees were all that sheltered my infant limbs, the blue heavens all that covered me. I am one of nature's children. I have always admired her. She shall be my glory. Her features, her robes, and the wreath about her brow, the seasons, her stately oaks and the evergreen, her hair, ringlets over the earth, all contribute to my enduring love of her. And wherever I see her, emotions of pleasure roll in my breast, and swell and burst like waves on the shores of the ocean, in prayer and praise to him who has placed me in her hand. It is thought great to be born in palaces, surrounded with wealth, but to be born in nature's wide domain is greater still. I would much more glory in this birthplace, with the broad canopy of heaven above me, and the giant arms of the forest trees for my shelter, than to be born in palaces of marble, studded with pillars of gold. Nature will be nature still, while palaces shall decay and fall in ruins. Yes, Niagara will be Niagara 1,000 years hence. The rainbow, a wreath over her brow, shall continue as long as the sun and the flowing of the river, while the work of art, however carefully protected and preserved, shall fade and crumble into dust. George Copway, Kagegagabo, Ojibwe. What is man without the beasts? If all the beasts were gone, men would die from great loneliness of spirit. For whatever happens to the beasts also happens to man. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth, befalls the children of the earth. Chief Seattle, Suquamish and Duwamish. I love that land of winding waters more than all the rest of the world. A man who would not love his father's grave is worse than a wild animal. Chief Joseph, Nez Perce. The character of the Indian's emotion left little room in his heart for antagonism toward his fellow creatures. For the Lakota, one of the 3 branches of the Sioux Nation, mountains, lakes, rivers, springs, valleys, and woods were all finished beauty. Winds, rain, snow, sunshine, day, night, and change of seasons were endlessly fascinating. Birds, insects, and animals filled the world with knowledge that defied the comprehension of man. The Lakota was a true naturalist, a lover of nature. He loved the earth and all things of the earth, and the attachment grew with age. The old people came literally to love the soil, and they sat or reclined on the ground with a feeling of being close to a mothering power. It was good for the skin to touch the earth, and the old people liked to remove their moccasins and walk with bare feet on the sacred earth. Their teepees were built upon the earth, and their altars were made of earth. The birds that flew in the air came to rest upon the earth, and it was the final abiding place of all things that lived and grew. The soil was soothing, strengthening, cleansing, and healing. This is why the old Indian still sits upon the earth instead of propping himself up and away from its life-giving forces. For him, to sit or lie upon the ground is to be able to think more deeply and to feel more keenly. He can see more clearly into the mysteries of life and come closer in kinship to other lives about him. Chief Luther Standing Bear, Teton Sioux. You ask me to plow the ground. Shall I take a knife and tear my mother's bosom? Then when I die she will not take me to her bosom to rest. You ask me to dig for stones. Shall I dig under her skin for her bones? Then when I die I cannot enter her body to be born again. You ask me to cut grass and make hay and sell it, and be rich like white men. But how dare I cut my mother's hair? I want my people to stay with me here. All the dead men will come to life again. Their spirits will come to their bodies again. We must wait here in the homes of our fathers and be ready to meet them in the bosom of our mother. Wovoka, Paiute. Great Spirit, I want no blood upon my land to stain the grass. I want it all clear and pure, and I wish it so that all who go through among my people may find it peaceful when they come, and leave peacefully when they go. 10 Bears, Yamparika, Comanche. I love the land and the buffalo and will not part with it. I want the children raised as I was. I don't want to settle. I love to roam over the prairies. There I feel free and happy. But when we settle down, we grow pale and die. Satanta, Kiowa Chief. 2. The Ways of Words and Silence. It does not require many words to speak the truth. Chief Joseph, Nez Perce. Silence was meaningful with the Lakota, and his granting of a space of silence before talking was done in the practice of true politeness and regardful of the rule that thought comes before speech. And in the midst of sorrow, sickness, death, or misfortune of any kind, and in the presence of the notable and great, silence was the mark of respect. More powerful than words was silence with the Lakota. His strict observance of this tenet of good behavior was the reason, no doubt, for his being given the false characterization by the white man of being a stoic. He has been judged to be dumb, stupid, indifferent, and unfeeling. As a matter of truth, he was the most sympathetic of men, but his emotions of depth and sincerity were tempered with control. Silence meant to the Lakota what it meant to Disraeli when he said, "Silence is the mother of truth." For the silent man was ever to be trusted, while the man ever ready with speech was never taken seriously. Chief Luther Standing Bear, Teton Sioux. In my opinion, it was chiefly owing to their deep contemplation in their silent retreats in the days of youth that the old Indian orators acquired the habit of carefully arranging their thoughts. They listened to the warbling of birds and noted the grandeur and the beauties of the forest, the majestic clouds which appear like mountains of granite floating in the air, the golden tints of a summer evening sky, and all the changes of nature possessed a mysterious significance. All this combined to furnish ample matter for reflection to the contemplating youth. Francis Assakenak, Blackbird, Ottawa. Because we are old, it may be thought that the memory of things may be lost with us, who have not, like you, the art of preserving it by committing all transactions to writing. We nevertheless have methods of transmitting from father to son an account of all these things. You will find the remembrance of them is faithfully preserved, and our succeeding generations are made acquainted with what has passed, that it may not be forgot as long as the earth remains. Kanikongo, Treaty Negotiations with 6 Nations. You must speak straight, so that your words may go as sunlight into our hearts. Cochise, like ironweed, Chiricahua Chief. A treaty in the minds of our people is an eternal word. Events often make it seem expedient to depart from the pledged word, but we are conscious that the first departure creates a logic for the second departure, until there is nothing left of the word. Declaration of Indian Purpose, 1961, American Indian Chicago Conference. How smooth must be the language of the whites, when they can make right look like wrong, and wrong like right. Black Hawk, Sauk. My father, you have made promises to me and to my children. If the promises had been made by a person of no standing, I should not be surprised to see his promises fail. But you, who are so great in riches and in power, I am astonished that I do not see your promises fulfilled. I would have been better pleased if you had never made such promises than that you should have made them and not performed them. Shingwakants, Little Pine. 3. The Ways of Learning. Knowledge was inherent in all things. The world was a library. Chief Luther Standing Bear, Oglala Sioux. Look at me. I am poor and naked, but I am the chief of the nation. We do not want riches, but we do want to train our children right. Riches would do us no good. We could not take them with us to the other world. We do not want riches. We want peace and love. Red Cloud, Sioux. You who are so wise must know that different nations have different conceptions of things. You will not therefore take it amiss if our ideas of the white man's kind of education happens not to be the same as yours. We have had some experience of it. Several of our young people were brought up in your colleges. They were instructed in all your sciences, but when they came back to us, they were bad runners, ignorant of every means of living in the woods, unable to bear either cold or hunger. They didn't know how to build a cabin, take a deer, or kill an enemy. They spoke our language imperfectly. They were therefore unfit to be hunters, warriors, or counselors. They were good for nothing. We are, however, not the less obliged for your kind offer, though we decline accepting it. To show our gratefulness, if the gentlemen of Virginia shall send us a dozen of their sons, we will take great care with their education, instruct them in all we know, and make men of them. Canasatego, Treaty of Lancaster. Children were taught that true politeness was to be defined in actions rather than in words. They were never allowed to pass between the fire and an older person or a visitor, to speak while others were speaking, or to make fun of a crippled or disfigured person. If a child thoughtlessly tried to do so, a parent, in a quiet voice, immediately set him right. Expressions such as, "Excuse me," "Pardon me," and "So sorry," now so often lightly and unnecessarily used, are not in the Lakota language. If one chanced to injure or cause inconvenience to another, the word wanunekun, or mistake, was spoken. This was sufficient to indicate that no discourtesy was intended, and that what had happened was accidental. Our young people, raised under the old rules of courtesy, never indulged in the present habit of talking incessantly and all at the same time. To do so would have been not only impolite, but foolish. For poise, so much admired as a social grace, could not be accompanied by restlessness. Pauses were acknowledged gracefully, and did not cause lack of ease or embarrassment. In talking to children, the old Lakota would place a hand on the ground and explain, "We sit in the lap of our mother. From her we, and all other living things, come. We shall soon pass, but the place where we now rest will last forever." So we too learn to sit or lie on the ground and become conscious of life about us in its multitude of forms. Sometimes we boys would sit motionless and watch the swallows, the tiny ants, or perhaps some small animal at its work, and ponder its industry and ingenuity. Or we lay on our backs and looked long at the sky, and when the stars came out,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?